Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Monster Report. My name is Nick Adam Poling, and today, with another kaiju discussion, we have via Skype Mr. Richard Pusateri. Good to have you.
Hello Nick, nice to be here.
All right. Mr. Pusateri, you'll know him from especially from the commentary track on All Monsters Attack on the Classic Media DVD, and that's one to definitely take a listen to. Very entertaining. He's also written for Japanese Giants, G-Fan, and Cult Movie Magazine, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we are going to get your thoughts on something maybe we haven't had the chance to hear your thoughts on, which is Godzilla vs. Megalon. Some of us may have had the chance to actually listen to the audio commentary that was done by Stuart Galbraith and Steve Rifle, but not everyone has had the chance to. But that's not really why we're here. We're kind of talking about maybe our reaction to the film and what we like, what we dislike about it. Maybe share a few facts we might know, but we're not necessarily in it for the academia. But tell me about maybe your first reaction when you first saw it and what you thought of the film Godzilla vs. Megalon.
Well, I don't remember. I ignored the movie on its first release. I believe I remember the theater that it was playing in, and I remember a friend of mine, Neil Norman, who's done a couple albums of Japanese monster music, and his GNP Records released the American versions of the Japanese soundtracks. His band was playing in the theater when the movie showed, but I just didn't go. I guess I didn't have time. And so I would have seen it on TV, and frankly, I was not impressed. I tended to ignore it because I'm a Godzilla fundamentalist. I saw the original Godzilla King of the Monsters in 1960 when the Cold War was much hotter. We were afraid of the Russians bombing us, and it was close enough to World War II that I knew the suffering of the Japanese civilians during that war. So I took the movie very seriously. And at that time, Godzilla was greatly respected and feared. Godzilla was a symbol of atom bombs and terror. He wasn't funny and he wasn't cute, and there were no campy movies yet. So when I started seeing the funny Godzilla movies, I was not impressed. And when I saw a child's Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Megalon, I was really not impressed. And it kind of stayed that way until I guess I saw Godzilla vs. Megalon, the Japanese print on the wide screen, a good print, and with English subtitles, and I enjoyed it much more. By the time I was accepting of Godzilla and all the different movies, I really enjoyed seeing it without the American dubbing, or without the English dubbing, and of course in the big screen, uncensored and not pan and scan. But still, I'm prejudiced because I like Godzilla's Revenge or All Monsters Attack much more, even though it's a lesser movie, smaller budget, and just a smaller movie in general. I look at Godzilla vs. Megalon as being a puppet show for children. And I know a lot of people love it, but I would much rather watch the Mystery Science Theater 3000 version than a original American version.
Yeah, it's quite entertaining seeing the bots and Joel, of course, throwing comments at the Megalon film, and it's interesting that they were able to not only have this Godzilla film, but as well as Sea Monster, to be able to riff that in MST3K, and I kind of wonder if that was even really appropriate for them as far as the rights were concerned.
They did not have the rights. You know, when at the time they did Godzilla vs. Megalon, it was considered to be in the public domain, and at that time, Touhou wasn't really pursuing that particular title. But eventually, I think around 98, Touhou copyrighted all images of Godzilla, so it was including all movies. So they didn't necessarily need to copyright that title. As long as Godzilla was in it, the image of their character, they could control it or license the image out. So when Rhino released the DVD, they had not approached Touhou. So Touhou put a cease and desist on them, and that disc was withdrawn from the market. You may remember there was a special video of Joel and TV's Frank instructing you to destroy your DVD of Godzilla versus Megalon, Mystery Science Theater 3000, and they showed you how to put it in a can and hit it with a hammer or something. And they were kind of laughing because, of course, no one is going to destroy that disc. But that's why we'll never see Godzilla versus the Sea Monster on a Mystery Science Theater 3000, because by now, besides the bad blood between lawyers, I'm sure it might be prohibitively expensive for them to license Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. And I don't think Touhou is really excited to see their movie held up to ridicule and edited with robots in space.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that a lot of times you could have two different opinions of the whole idea of riffing a film on MST3K or in any form or another. What's interesting is that I think that some of the fans of the show MST3K, that may have been their first exposure to Godzilla, and actually may have even become a fan as a result, despite the fact that the films that they chose were less than reputable, and of course they hurled their jokes and insults at it. But at the same time, I think some of the films that they have riffed, I've actually become a fan of and had some respect for after the fact, of course, seeing them on MST3K. So it's interesting that they, are so protective of some of their material on one end, and at the same time really want to promote it on the other end, which that's a good way of promoting it, is having it riffed.
Sure, I agree with that. And probably the first time I seriously watched Godzilla versus Megalon probably was Mystery Science Theater 3000. I don't think I ever had a copy of it. And I remember watching it with a friend of mine, and I wasn't really familiar with it. He had rented the video, and I watched it at his house, and I wasn't familiar with it. And that's probably the first time I watched it from beginning to end, uninterrupted with commercials or editing. And also, Touhou does seem to be cutting itself off from a lot of good publicity with a lot of things they're doing, but that's the way they treat their character. And it's important to remember that Touhou doesn't do business with the fans at all. It's nothing personal. Touhou just has no relationship with anybody outside of Japan other than corporations or, business entities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me.
No.
And they only want to have a relationship with one entity at a time. So if they license the movie to, say, Scimitar, they're not going to license it out for any advertising tie-in or any other kind of promotion. They're very strict. It might be old school Japanese business to only do one transaction at a time, only have one contract running at a time. And some North American fans feel like Touhou doesn't care about them or Touhou dislikes them. It's just that Touhou only has relationships with other companies, not the fans per se, outside of Japan. In Japan, there's fan-based events, but offshore, they have no relationship with the fans. Nothing personal, They just don't do it.
It's just the way they conduct business. And yeah, and in a lot of ways, we talked about, the public domain aspect, whereas this film was in so many ways considered public domain, which is why we probably had so many different companies releasing, the VHS days, releasing a Godzilla versus Megalon with so many different box art and cover arts, and of course, a couple of them used that publicity stunt that in New York we're having Godzilla and Megalon on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. You've seen that, of course, before.
Sure, sure, sure. There must be 100 different videos of releases, and they on VHS, and they would just copy each other. They're completely pirate organizations, probably offshore, not American companies. And as Steve and Stuart point out in their excellent commentary, that's really one of the main reasons why most of the fans of this movie probably saw it in the theater in '76 or in the mid '80s when the VHS started to proliferate. This movie had a lot of exposure, and it was easy to get a hold of the VHS tapes. And I know a lot of people, it's the first Godzilla movie they saw, and they love it for that reason. But I'm not one of them.
Yeah, but other than the nostalgia factor, it's definitely got a lot up against it when it comes to a lot of the Godzilla fans who really like to have Godzilla as a force of destruction, and and not brought down to a human level or even a child's level. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit. We talked about, now that you've had the chance to see it, in widescreen now recently on home video, we're seeing it in DVD and Blu-ray format, in a decent transfer, almost like an entirely new movie, being able to see, of course, to the edges, being able to see it, unlike what we saw in the VHS. The VHS transfers were so just poor, pitiful picture quality. I almost thought growing up that, gosh, did the budget, get cut so bad that they actually had to use cheap film stock, and that's probably not necessarily the case, because when you see it, you see it in that full resolution that they transferred it in. There's a decent movie behind all of the clutter of all those old copies that were out there.
Yes, the Blu-ray does look really good, and it's just a shame that such a good commentary, one of the best audio commentaries ever, has been, kept from the public. And hopefully it might be available someday, because it adds so much to the marketing of the movie and why it was such a success. It made a lot of money. It was a very successful exhibition, and it had the NBC TV. That's another reason why I didn't like this movie. When I saw the NBC premiere with John Belushi, it was an hour with commercials. So I think they said it was like 42 minutes long. And I did see the King of the Monsters ridiculed, held up for ridicule. And I didn't really think John Belushi was especially funny in the Godzilla suit, and seeing what I consider a bad movie chopped up to fit into a 40-some minute envelope really soured me. I think I started drinking heavily, and I probably was unconscious by the end of that hour. I guess that was, to answer your original question, I think that NBC broadcast was my first, it would have had to have been my first exposure to Godzilla versus Megalon. So we got off on the wrong foot there. But it was a great marketing tool, and it made kids especially want to see the movie. And I'm not sure if it was still in the theaters by '77, but all that played into the success of the movie at the time.
Yeah. And if you can give it anything, it did have the marketing behind it, the publicity. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. My first exposure to the film was a very short a snippet in a documentary, a dinosaur movie documentary. It was called Hollywood Dinosaur Chronicles. And
I think I have that.
yeah, there's copies out there, and I just remember seeing it. I think either on the Discovery Channel or another channel, and it was it would show dinosaurs in the movies, and it had the shot of course Godzilla, and he was doing his famous drop horizontal double foot kick, and of course as a kid I thought that was really cool, but at the same time. I just don't know if this is going to be a good movie or not. I saw, of course, the character Jet Jaguar in there, thinking it was Ultraman, because I had a very small amount of exposure to Ultraman at that time as a kid, thinking that was what was happening there. And there was no internet, so I couldn't do my research, and I just had to find me a copy eventually on tape and figure out the story. At least that wasn't Ultraman at all, so I was doubly disappointed there with the film itself and the fact that it wasn't a Godzilla Ultraman team up. Of course, the picture quality was down, a downer for me, and the fact that you had this just silly story of these, the Mu Empire and Robert
Antonio.
Yeah, Antonio of Seatopia, Robert Dunham. They're very hairy, toga-wearing emperor there, and just thought, this is really silly. It's hardly a Godzilla movie, and even on top of that, yeah,
it really is a Jet Jaguar movie, although he's not mentioned in the title. The Jet Jaguar is, or Jaguar, as the dubbers pronounce it, is on the team of the human characters, and Godzilla just kind of comes in and helps Jet Jaguar out. I wanted to say that I really like this suit that they used in the movie. They fixed up the head a little bit from the previous movie, and I like it. Most people don't, but what's interesting is they had a different suit actor. This may have been the first Godzilla movie without Mr. Nakajima wearing the suit, bringing the suit to life. So this other suit actor may not have had the emotions that we're used to. And there are a lot of in-jokes, I think. You would have to be a Japanese youngster and watching sports and other superhero things to get all the little gestures Godzilla does. He makes certain hand signs that are connected to other sports or other Japanese entertainment. I wanted to take this opportunity to voice my theory that Jet Jaguar came out in English dubbing. I'm pretty sure that the character was originally called Jet Jaguar, because in the movie, the characters of the songs, they're clearly saying Jaga, not the UK pronunciation Jaguar. I believe this movie was dubbed in Hong Kong, and that accounts for the the British pronunciation of Jaguar. And I wonder if the dubbers actually came up with the name Jaguar as opposed to Jaga or Jagger. Because in the Japanese magazine books called Mooks, M-O-O-K, the Encyclopedia of Godzilla, eventually, like most movies, came out with their own Encyclopedia of Godzilla, and Jet Jagger is always spelled like Mick Jagger, Jagger. So you see that in the contemporary Japanese books, and you hear in the movie they're saying Jaga, Jaga. And It wasn't until like much later when the Japanese publications began spelling it Jaguar, the way Americans would pronounce it. And no one else agrees with me that Jet Jagger became Jet Jaguar. The other famous people in our fandom have declined to join me in my crusade to identify the origins of Jet Jaguar. And I really do think it may have been just an afterthought of the dubbers saying, well, how are we going to pronounce this Jet Jaguar? And I think it really came out of the dubbing, not so much Touhou Studio or the original script.
Yeah, that makes sense actually in a lot of ways because even in that English dub, yes, the singer singing the Jet Jaguar song is singing the Japanese pronunciation of the name there, and of course, if you hadn't thought of the fact that as a kid even that this is a Japanese movie, then switched over to English, some things fall through the cracks, some things get changed, mispronounced. I don't know how many times I've heard a mispronunciation. It just, as the fans, of course, it just pierces right into our head and right into our souls when they mispronounce something. You'd mentioned that in All Monsters Attack, of course. There was a lot of mispronunciations of the monsters' names.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I don't think these Hong Kong dubbers spent very much time in preparation. I think it was all extemporaneous. I know that's talking to Peter Fernandez or listening to Peter Fernandez talk about Titra in New York City. They're dubbing. He wrote the scripts, and the actors were brought in just for the studio time. I don't think they had meetings or read-throughs. I think he just prompted them for the looping, and they were done with it. And I believe it may have even been a faster process in Hong Kong, where Toho contracted out their English-speaking soundtracks. So that's my theory of Jet Jaguar.
And getting back to the dubbing there, actually, the young boy Roxon in this, of course, also playing the young boy in Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, Hedorah. I think, you mentioned as far as Ichiro in the All Monsters Attack commentary, talking about how that child actor downplays some of his acting to be a little less annoying in a lot of ways. I kind of wonder, I haven't seen the Japanese version of this, how you feel about this young boy and his character. I will say the dubbing, though, with that piercing voice, for me, it's almost like, don't say another line because I just don't want to hear the voice. But I kind of wonder, how you feel about the young actor and his abilities to be less annoying.
It is, the dubbing makes him aggressively precocious. That you should know, and it's Baby Rider. You should know. The intonations are just very jarring to the ear. And being the inventor who's smarter than his adult companions clearly was aimed at a child. Like dumb adults don't understand how these robots work. And being an adult, I prefer Ichiro acting like a child, being kind of confounded by the adult world, and trying to enjoy life as best he could under the circumstances and going into his world of fantasy. And then at the end, his character arc makes him more aggressive and behaving more like a grown-up child. But even compared to Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, this character in Megalon is off-putting. I can't say I wait for his return.
Yeah, and and the other actors, of course, there's a lot of them that this may have been their only credit to their Godzilla or monster, Toho monster flick kind of careers. We do have Katsuhiko Sasaki, who did end up in Terror Mechagodzilla and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, and he was at G-Fest a few years ago, actually. So he had a few credits under his belt. But as far as the rest of them, I guess let me ask, what did you think of Robert Dunham? You kind of started talking about him, but
I always like him. I think the camera liked him, the camera loved him, and he had a good, balanced approach in his acting technique. And I think he's very entertaining in Dagora, the space monster, and the little bit that he's in Mothra, he does good. And in this movie, it's pretty comical, and they must have been trying to make the Seatopians comical because that dancing was so bad, it almost had to be deliberate. I don't know. And his appearance and his, you know, I think he fit in, and I liked him very much.
yeah, and then the fact that these Seatopians, not only, they are, an underground race of humans that assumedly, have a technology superior to our own. They have at their disposal a monster, of course, and they've got a grudge to settle with humanity on the surface. But they also have communication apparently with aliens because they contact the aliens of the Nebula M and ask them to borrow their monster.
Yes, the plot hole of if they're so smart, they make their own sun underground, why they would need to steal a robot of someone else's instead of designing their own robot to be exactly what they need, that doesn't make any sense at all. But, sense in a movie about a cyborg cockroach and a Gigan. And anyway, I'm not going to try to make sense of it. But there's a plot hole that the movie is conscious of. The movie talks about the conflict. Why are you stealing our robot if you're so smart? And he said, I think Antonio says, we don't have time to build a robot, so we're just going to grab yours.
Yeah.
With the actors, the studio seemed to give up on their great actors with All Monsters Attack, Godzilla's Revenge, because you have a lot of cameos of some of their finest character actors, and everybody is just really good in Godzilla's Revenge. And in Godzilla versus Megalon, I guess they're competent, but they seem not to have as many tricks up their sleeve as the character actors in All Monsters Attack, Godzilla's Revenge. And Touhou never got back to putting really talented actors in their movies. Even in Terror of Mechagodzilla, they brought back Ikyo Sawamura, who was dying at the time, I guess, and Mr. Hirata in a really campy, over-the-top role, Dr. Mifune.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of any of the other old-school, really good actors that were in Terror of Mechagodzilla. But after that, then they just went to competent actors. I don't mean to demean anybody who was in the Millennium series of movies or the 90s movies, but there's nothing like those actors from 64, 65, and 66 up till like 69. They had really good actors, really, really good actors in those old movies.
Yeah.
And Godzilla's Revenge was the end of it.
Yeah, the Touhou Family. I've always been wanting to put together, a database and show actually specifically on what they call the Touhou Family, the Takaratas, Sahara, all of them that were the common ones in most of the the '60s, especially Godzilla films, because they were a family. They were contracted by the studio. They waited till they got their assignments, and it seems as though, big or small, they got a role in these
And
films.
even Haruo Nakajima, you can see him in the background of many of these movies, and even in the movie that ended up in What's Up, Tiger Lily, I think.
Yeah.
I want to say Key of Keys or Secret of the Keys. I'm drawing a blank with the title of the original movie, but he's one of the henchmen, and I guess he was just a all-around utility player for a lot of these movies. And all of the guys that play reporters, my favorite is Hideo Shibuya. He was in the first two Godzilla movies. I think he's in King Kong versus Godzilla. He always plays a reporter, and he appears in Kurosawa movies also. He plays a reporter in The Bad Sleep Well. And he's just a competent guy in the background who appears in all these movies. And there must be like a couple dozen of these guys that you were alluding to that we know their faces and we love them and we see them in all these movies, mostly from the mid-'60s.
Yeah, we're missing that in this one, as far as, and we're even missing our star Godzilla, the original suit actor. We've got a new one, like you said. The last film, Godzilla versus Gigan, that was his retirement for Nakajima.
That was the movie before Godzilla versus Megalon.
This one. Gigan came before Megalon.
And went from Cosmic Monster to Megalon.
Cosmic Monster, I believe, came first. Yes, you might be right actually about that one. I could be out of order with my show here.
No, I think it was Monster Island. I'm thinking Monster Island. I'm sorry. Godzilla on Monster Island became Godzilla versus Gigan.
Yeah.
Right?
Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla was 74. I'm actually IMDbing this as we speak. Megalon was 73. So yes, Godzilla on Monster Island, or Gigan, was the one immediately prior to this film, Megalon. And then so the next one up is Mechagodzilla. Yeah. Also directed by Jun Fukuda.
Good. And I think he brought a little bit of vigor to the series with Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, and Mr. Nakano was trying very hard. They must have had a little bit better budget with Mechagodzilla, I suspect, because Megalon didn't have much of a budget. Mr. Nakano gave a great presentation at an Asian Fantasy Film Festival. He talked about creating Gigan and Megalon and doing the dam scene in Megalon.
Yeah, and I've always wanted to ask this of you, and I usually ask my guests the same kind of thing. If you were to say, to a light Godzilla fan, Godzilla versus Megalon, the one where he whatevers, like for instance, Smog Monsters, the one where he flies, in Gigan or Godzilla and Monster Island, it's the one where he and Angulus talks. You remember. What would you say is the memorable moment about this film? One that sticks out in your mind?
Well, personally, I think of the dam sequence, and that's what I would talk to someone who likes these movies the same way I do, a peer, say. But if I was talking to one of my friends who's not really a fan of the genre, I'd probably say, the one where he does the flying kick as immortalized in one of the intros to Mystery Science Theater 3000. And during the intro, you see that flying kick, and the robot, Crow T-Robot, I believe, looks away like he can't stand to watch it. So that's the few seconds I would refer to. And I believe the bad parts are Godzilla doing the dance in Monster Zero, which I think people kind of accept that now. But Godzilla speaking, I'm sorry, disregard what I said about Monster Zero. It's Godzilla flying in Smoggy. It's Godzilla talking in Gigan, and the flying kick in Megalon. I guess those are the big three bad moments. The big three worst ever.
Yeah, right on with that. And, I think there's some of what Ed Godrzewski and in some of his commentaries talks about, like the money shots as far as, this one, many of them, the money shots in this one. I can't even specifically think of anything except for what you mentioned about the dam scene, which that was quite impressive, I feel.
Yeah, they deliberately, according to the commentary, Steve and Stewart say that they kept a lot of their budget for that one shot. And I always say that almost every Godzilla movie has one excellent special effects sequence. Even in a bad movie like Megalon, it has the dam. And then there are some, the best Godzilla movies have really bad scenes. In the original Godzilla, my favorite, after the incredible scene of Godzilla's first appearance during the typhoon on the island, and he kills the boy's family, and you see the storm, and the waves hitting the island are just so magnificent. Mr. Subaraya really knew how to photograph water and the rain and the wind, and the music is superb. And then they end the scene with that toy helicopter being pulled over. It looks exactly like a toy helicopter, and it doesn't fall naturally. You can see it's being pulled. So right there you have an excellent scene with a terrible moment. And in almost every Godzilla movie, I can point out an excellent scene and a terrible moment. Just the Megalon is full of terrible moments, but my opinion. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I think we're actually getting close to the end of our episode here, and I kind of want to just get some final thoughts on, what you feel as far as where the series may have went from here or led to up to this point. Just any final thoughts that you might have on Megalon, and we'll sign off after that.
Well, it was clearly, I believe, television knocking off a movie character or series or franchise, because now in Japan, Ultraman is still very, very popular because it's been on TV all these years, and Godzilla is like I like to say, like the Brady Bunch. Everybody knows what it is, but nobody cares. In Japan, Godzilla's really passé because he was swept aside by television. And you can see it that they're trying to compete with television in Megalon by bringing in the superhero, the robot superhero. And it's a nice little time capsule of movie heroes being pushed aside for television heroes in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for agreeing to this interview. It's been very entertaining. I definitely will probably ask you in the future to maybe get your reactions on some other films. But as far as this is concerned, we really appreciate it. And do you have any plans for the future for the fandom, or have anything for future writings, commentaries, or anything at G-Fest, for instance?
At this time, the only plan that I have is to present at G-Fest in Chicago this summer another presentation on the international relationship between giant monsters from England to the United States to Japan. And next G-Fest, I'm really going to focus on Mothra and Gorgo, both 1961, and both sympathetic monsters, or monsters the audience can empathize with, being drawn to the big city by actions of unscrupulous people. And I'd like to do some research to find out where these two scripts intersected. A innocent being put on display by a mercenary businessman, and a giant monster has to come and destroy a city to set things right. And they both have happy endings. Gorgo and Mothra, the monster flies away at the end without getting killed. So that's pretty much my plan for the summer. And I just plan to look forward to more. Steve Reifel is going to try to get a film festival in conjunction with his book, The Biography of Mr. Honda. And it might move from city to city. They're going to have Touhou provide some high-quality prints of some Godzilla movies and non-Godzilla movies. And so I might be involved with that locally here in Los Angeles. But otherwise, that's about it for me.
Okay, well, looking forward to both of those events, and especially, encourage people to check that out if it comes to their town, and check out G-Fest if they get the chance.
Everybody at G-Fest, come to my presentation.
Yep, there's his shameless publicity he used my show for. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, will we have Richard Pusateri and somebody else on the World Trade Center displaying this, or maybe on the on Big Ben, or in England on the London Bridge, maybe?
Yes, Tower Bridge.
Tower Bridge, that's right. That's the one he destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we learned that from Mystery Science Theater.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for being with
Sure
us.
enough.
Yep, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Monster Report. We will catch you next time.